So, good morning. This morning, I want a fellow teacher, someone I actually trained with, Phil Davidson. He's in Richmond, has a Sangha there. We were in a meeting a month or so ago, and he gave me this new sort of paradigm that I want to talk about. And it's it's acknowledge, allow, accept, and surrender. Four stages, four steps. And some of you that have been around a while, it may remind you of RAIN, the practice of recognizing, accepting, investigating, and non-identification. But it's a little different, and it really resonated with me at the time. So I wanted to talk about it this morning and really make the case for how I think it's one of really a practical pathway for our practice. Again, as we often talk about, a way of meeting life as it is, not as we wish it to be. And a lot of Buddhist teachings point to these profound states of awakening, these sort of uh, pivotal moments. But this the foundation of the practice, I think, is really grounded in how we work moment to moment, especially the difficult moments. And so today, these four steps, which I'm going to focus on, are really another practical life application. As you know, that's my bias, practical Dharma, not an abstract doctrine that doesn't have much day-to-day relevance. So we start with acknowledge, and this is something we often start with because the mind cannot work with what it refuses to see. In Buddhism, mindfulness begins with recognition, acknowledgement here being a form of recognition. We recognize the breath, we recognize the body, we recognize what feelings are arising, thoughts, impulses, on and on and on. If we don't pay attention to that, if we're not self aware, we've got nowhere to go. So, for instance, when a painful emotion arises, anger, fear, resentment, anxiety, the first task, especially in this sequence today, is to name it. Anger's arising, anxiety's here now. The naming cuts through some of the fog that can create reactivity. If we're not paying attention, we're more likely to react to that response, that emotion, than to work with it skillfully. So if anger is present, as I said, we just say anger is here, or fear is present, fear is here. Not in a form of an analysis, a judgment, or a story, just bare recognition, just simple acknowledgement. And too often, I think, in our sequence of our practice, we sometimes skip this step because we immediately jump into wanting to fix it, to suppress it, to run away from it, to be reactive to it, on and on and on. All, in my view, and I think you would agree, unskillful responses. Now, acknowledgement, though, is not passivity. It's not just, a kind of a passive toss off. It is achieving some clarity about what the experience is in the moment. And without acknowledging the truth of the moment, any other response is really an escape from reality. It's just running away from it. And the Buddha repeatedly emphasized knowing what is present in the mind as it is present, as it occurs. This is why acknowledgement is the entry point into all of our challenges of trying to transform our response to the world. And what acknowledgement does is it stops denial in its tracks. It stops denial from taking root. It stops reactivity from hiding behind vagueness. Okay, reactivity comes out of vagueness. Okay, so that's acknowledgement. That's our first step. The second step is allowing, and we talked a few weeks ago, maybe a month or so ago, about allowing versus acceptance, and I'm going to talk about it again today. And to allow is simply to permit the experience, whatever it is, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, to exist without resistance. In other words, it means this is here now, and for now, I will let it be here. I won't run away from it. I won't try to suppress it, deny it, pretend it's not there. Now, allowing here doesn't mean we indulge it or we feed it. So if I'm angry, it doesn't mean I just feed the anger. It means, though, letting the emotion complete its natural and impermanent life cycle. instead of pushing it away or trying to control it, because that's often where we go if we're not present, if we're not mindful. And as I said a moment ago, we remind ourselves that whatever's arising is impermanent. So it's not like we're stuck with it. In Buddhist psychology, this is the central function of mindfulness, to observe without clinging if it's pleasant, or aversion pushing away if it's unpleasant. When we allow an emotion to be present, we take the fuel out of it that would make it grow stronger and would make it take over us, prevail. For example, if I'm talking to a colleague or a friend and frustration arises, allowing here means I don't scold myself for being frustrated. I don't judge myself for frustrating. There's nothing bad there about feeling frustrated. I don't push it away. I don't push it down. But nor do I let it explode toward the other person with reactivity. I silently acknowledge its presence and I give it space inside of that awareness. But I don't have to act on it. And in fact, I don't want to act on it. And this is similar to the Buddha's instructions, which he gave again and again, to treat emotions like visitors. They come, they stay a while, and eventually they leave when they're no longer fed. When we don't give them fuel, then they impermanently will leave. So allowing here becomes an act of patience that we talked about recently. It's really just being patient with it. But that interrupts this habitual reaction, this habitual attempt of trying to control every aspect of our lives. In daily practice, in pragmatic terms, allowing might look like pausing for a breath before we respond. We put that pause in there. It is so important, we sometimes refer to it as the sacred pause. Or it might be silently noting the feeling while continuing to do what we're doing. Over time, this simple habit, putting that pause in, not reacting, builds inner stability. It helps ground us. It builds equanimity. It builds grounding. Okay, so um, that's the allowing. Then we move to the third step, which is acceptance. And here, this is a little different because we move from this is here now to this belongs here now. This is where this belongs. Acceptance means that recognizing what is happening is not a mistake. It's not an error. It's not a failure. It is simply part of the unfolding of the conditions that the Buddha described. Everything, everything arises due to causes and conditions. Our our emotions, our reactions, our discomfort, even our desire for things to be different, all have causes. Now, acceptance, remember, doesn't mean we have to like it. It's not agreement. It's not endorsement. It's not, nor is it resignation. It's just, this is here now. This is okay to be here now. And again, we often conflate accepting with liking. Not so. This point gets missed again and again in the teachings. It simply means we acknowledge reality without demanding it be different than it currently is. That's the nature of acceptance. And in practice, acceptance changes our relationship to discomfort. It changes our relationship to pain. Instead of believing that suffering signals failure or a weakness on our part, we simply understand that it is a natural part of being human. We all bump into it. When sorrow or disappointment or perceived failure arises, acceptance says, this is a human feeling. It's fine to be here. It's just part of the deal. And when we can say that, we can bring that level of wisdom to it. It helps dissolve any shame we might have about ourselves, that we're not coping, or we're not strong, or we're not this, or we're not that. It helps us, it helps prevent us from piling on judgments with what you will recall the Buddha called the second arrow, all the baggage we bring to our responses. And it dissolves the illusion that we can be whole, only be whole, when circumstances match our preferences. It also broadens our compassion because we see everybody's dealing with stuff. When we see that our own emotions are conditioned, we begin to see that others are conditioned as well. And we stop also taking things so personally. It's not personal, it's not the universe punishing me. Or someone else's anger is not interpreted as an attack on me. It's just their conditioning, which they bring to the table. All of this is recognized as a conditioned experience. And accepting our own humanity opens the doors to accepting the humanity of others. Now, in difficult situations, acceptance might look like recognizing that a relationship has changed, or that a job has ended, or that someone has disappointed us, or that our plan is not going to unfold the way we hoped it would. And this allows us to work from a place of clarity rather than resistance, rather than just clenching down and getting reactive to it. It's just stuff happens. We stop fighting with reality because it's a fight we're always going to lose, and we suffer in the process. Acceptance gives us psychological and emotional grounding to choose wise action rather than reactive behavior. So that's acceptance. And then the fourth and final is what my friend Phil calls surrender. And this is often misunderstood, so I want to take a minute to hopefully clarify this. It's not, surrender does not in this context mean giving up, throwing in the towel, becoming passive. True surrender is the release of the inner struggle against reality. We stop fighting reality. It is letting go. There's our term, letting go of trying to control everything. It is the softening, and we feel it as a softening that happens when we stop fighting the present with the present moment. When I stop fighting with the reality that is right in front of me and insisting that it be different. So surrender in this context is really related to letting go, to non-clinging. And remember, the Buddha taught that clinging is the root of suffering. It's not the painful experience. That's going to be painful, and that's what it is. But it's the insistence that it be different that causes the additional suffering. So surrender shifts us from this, I must control this now, to I will meet this with openness and humility and surrender to it. And when it arises, when surrender arises, there is a sense of spaciousness. We can literally feel the spaciousness. We can feel things open up. We stop tightening around whatever emotion we're experiencing. We stop tightening around the story or the narrative that we're telling ourselves. We stop tightening around our desire for a particular outcome, our desired outcome. And when we do that, that moment becomes workable. We're not stuck. Our responses become wiser. We're no longer consumed by that emotion and controlled by that emotion. Excuse me. We're no longer consumed or controlled by the story we tell about that emotion. Now, in an interpersonal context, surrender might look like admitting I can't control your behavior. Excuse me, and letting go of the fantasy that I can and that you should submit to my controlling your behavior. It might, for instance, look like releasing the need to always win an argument, to be right in an argument. It might look like allowing myself to feel the grief rather than running away from it. It might be the quiet acknowledgement that I can't predict or control the future. Surrender brings with it peace because circumstances become easier. When we're not fighting with them, they become easier. Our minds become more gentle. So when we put these four steps together, acknowledge, allow, accept, surrender, we get a complete cycle for working with any difficult inner experience, not unlike with the paradigm of Ray. We acknowledge because that brings emotions into clear awareness. There it is. Now I have it in front of me. I allow it because I give space to it without resisting it. It's clinging to it or pushing it away. I accept it because it fits the larger experience of understanding causes and conditions. Oh, that's how this got here. And then I surrender because it softens the clinging and it frees the heart and mind. Now, this four-step process just mirrors the natural movement of mindfulness. If we're moving through it, we may not label it this way or identify the steps, but that's effectively what we're doing. First we notice what's there, then we stop fighting it, then we understand it with wisdom, and then finally we release that grasping that turns the experience into suffering. Every time I'm clinging that I need things to be different, I'm going to suffer. I'm going to be tense. I'm going to be stressed. I'm going to be frustrated. And in daily life, these four steps can, without even having to label them, as I said, can be applied to small frustrations and large challenges alike. Sitting in traffic, you know, standing in a long line, whatever. We acknowledge the irritation. We allow the tension to come up and we accept that the circumstances cannot be changed. And then we surrender that sense of urgency that we have about whatever the situation is. Or if I feel anxious about an uncertain future, I acknowledge the anxiety. I allow it to be present because I understand it's impermanent. I accept that uncertainty is part of life and I surrender the demand for perfect safety. If a relationship ends, I acknowledge the grief. I allow the sadness to move through me. I accept that all things are impermanent and I surrender the attachment to how life had been with that person. Now, the beauty of this, to me, of this method is that it doesn't require special circumstances, long hours of meditation, deep philosophical study. It's why I call what I teach practical Dharma. It is boots on the ground. It is, here's how you do it, step by step by step. We can practice it in our offices, in our kitchen, during a conversation, while lying awake at night because I can't go back to sleep. It is not an escape from life, but it is a way of living life more fully. Our path emphasizes wisdom and compassion, and that is built into this paradigm because the process that I've described today cultivates both wisdom and compassion. Wisdom comes from seeing the nature of reality clearly. Compassion comes from relating to others and ourselves with a certain gentleness. When we acknowledge without judgment ourselves and others, we are practicing compassion. When we allow experience without pushing away, we are practicing patience that we recently talked about. When we accept without bitterness, we are practicing equanimity. When we surrender without fear, we are practicing letting go. You can see how all these things conflate, how they come together. Because ultimately, acknowledge, allow, accept, and surrender lead to a simple truth of becoming more intimate with our own lives and no longer or less running away from our experience. Stop fighting losing battles. We meet each moment with clarity and softness. It is not mystical. It is not esoteric. It is practical, bringing mindfulness to everyday experience. And the beauty of this to me, and I've seen this in my own life, and I hope you have as well, is that with these steps or with the practice in general, suffering becomes more workable, manageable. We have some agency. The mind becomes more balanced. The heart is freer. There's more joy. The suffering diminishes. We experience greater peace in our lives. So that's some thoughts today on the four steps of acknowledging, accepting, allowing, accepting, and surrender. So let us talk about it.